to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?
Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. We are so excited to be back with you. We had a break last week, and actually, I don't think I've been here for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think
that's right. So I am so excited to be back on the show to continue to bring you these informative topics that we bring you from week to week. And we just really, really thank you for joining us. So please share it with your family, your friends, and go to listenvisionlive.com so you can see the show in its entirety. And I am Dr. Sharon Cradle, and I am the oldest of this dynamic duo.
And I am Sherelle Higgins, and I am the favorite of this dynamic duo.
Yes, and we are excited to be here. It is hot outside. It is a little hot in here, but we're going to get through it. And as soon as our guest comes, we're going to take a break and bring her on because this particular topic is just near and dear to my heart as well as probably to so many of your hearts. And we're going to talk about how to avoid student loan debt and how to access college scholarships. And I don't think that that's a topic that we can talk about enough.
That's right.
With the onset of so many rising seniors getting ready to go to college, students that are already in college. And so as soon as our guest gets here, we will definitely dive into that particular topic.
And with my son being a rising senior, I'm going to be particularly interested in this topic so I can pick up every nugget I can because he doesn't have a college fund, right? Because at some point about 29 years ago, I had to make a decision about whether I was going to save for a college fund or a retirement fund. And you all have heard me talk about retirement on more than one occasion, and so I chose a retirement fund. And so I'm going to be really interested in hearing what she has to say about scholarship money.
Yes. And so as we do every week, we start with scripture. And I believe this scripture is just so appropriate for whether it's student loan debt, credit card debt, housing debt, whatever debt we have, card loan debt. And so the scripture is Deuteronomy 15:6. For the Lord your God will bless you as he has promised you, and he will lend to many nations, but you will not borrow. And you will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. And that's the piece that I like. I really like that last piece because we know that when we're in any type of debt, people are ruling over us. They're controlling our lives. You know, it controls what we can do, whether or not we can vacation, whether or not we can buy a house, whatever it is. And then we have to pay interest on these loans.
Oh, my goodness.
Right?
Lots of interest.
And so, yes. So God didn't put us in a place to be a borrower. He wants us to be a lender.
And if you look at your mortgage loan statement, right, the paperwork, you almost pay as much in interest as you pay for the house over a 30-year period.
Exactly. And that's why 30-year loans, no. Make some sacrifices and get those down. And we're going to talk about making some sacrifices today to make sure that your children can go to school without that kind of debt. And we're going to talk about that when our guest comes on. But first and foremost, we would be remiss if we did not say publicly happy birthday to our baby sister, Kiani Williams, who supports us in everything that we do. And can you believe our younger sister is 39? Actually, we have two sisters that are 39.
Yes.
We'll have to talk about that later.
two that's 39 and two that's 45.
That's right.
and they're not twins.
That's right. No twins. So it's a little complicated, but most of you all probably can
and
understand.
And two that's 55.
That's right. Yes.
I think I'm the only one in the group that don't have no sister the same age.
No, that's correct. Oh, my goodness. But anyway, there's a lot of us.
Yes.
And we do share some similar ages, the same age, just a few months apart. And also, I just want to say that last weekend I went to my husband's mom's side of the family reunion, the White family, and I just want to, give a shout out to the White family for their family reunion, which is always phenomenal. And they are just a model of what family can be like, right? Not that there are no challenges, but the love, right? And the God-fearing family and the talent that's in that family.
Yes.
And to just be a member of the family, you just feel blessed, right? And so we had a wonderful time down in New Bern, North Carolina. It's such a beautiful place. So that was wonderful, and I thank God for traveling mercies. Yes, and also, as many of you know, my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. That's the best part. I like to say that.
I see.
Anyway, we just held our 54th National Convention in New Orleans, Louisiana, and it started on last Wednesday, but of course, due to the tropical storm, I think Barry that went through, they had to cut it short early, which I thought was very smart, to get as many sorors and other people out of the city as many as possible. And so we thank God that everybody is safe. Some sorors had to stay down there. And if you see any of the video feeds, sorors do what sorors do. They were down there doing community service. They were just making the best of it, trying to stay safe. And we know that Tropical Storm Barry has kind of passed over, and most of the sorors are back. And I just thought that was a smart move, because we know that some organizations, not necessarily Greek organizations, but organizations that put on conferences, they spend a lot of money. Yeah, and absolutely. Some of them probably would not have canceled it. And so because they canceled it, of course, they had purchased all of this food. And so all of that food was donated to those locally who needed the food. That's amazing. Yes. And I want to say maybe up to 19,000 meals, maybe.
I think it was 17,000 if I
and
I read online.
Yes, that was just phenomenal. So we are so grateful that everyone is, making their way back. The last few that were left behind, making their way back home safely. And finally, Sherelle and I, we did double duty today.
Yes.
We were on the great, the I Am Dr. Sharon show this morning, and she is phenomenal. We were just on there talking about who we were and our businesses, and it was just a great platform. So we really thank Sharon for inviting us to that show. And Sharon's show, the I Am Dr. Sharon show, is aired on Urban Style Media on Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m.
And we're going to have her on our show. So we just got to work out the logistics of that, so you all will get an opportunity to see who she is and watch her show as well.
Exactly. So thank you all for your support. And so as we talked about this student loan debt, we know that based on my research that we are in a student loan debt crisis. And I don't want to steal our guest thunder, but I just want to kind of set us up for this. And it is a crisis, and this is according to all kind of articles, but this one is specifically comes from Forbes magazine. And they cited that 45 million Americans owe $1.5 trillion in student loan debt, which is 50% more than what they owe on credit cards. Remember when credit cards used to be the thing in terms of, the most debt that people are in? Not anymore. It is student loan debt. And of course, we know that the repayment part of it is significant, because we know that on average, students have to pay at least $400 a month on average back in student loan debt over a 10 to 20 year time frame with a 16% interest. Isn't that amazing?
That is crazy.
On average. That is just mind-boggling. And all those students who are coming out of school now earn on average of $50,000. Some people would say that that's a lot of money, but not necessarily, because that's before taxes.
and if you owe $125,000 in student loan, but you only make $50 on paper, and you really only bring home about $35, and you still got to live, that's not a lot of money. Right.
And so then on average, students are coming out with almost $30,000 in student loan debt, each student. Isn't that's a lot. Anyway, that's just a lot. And on top of that, 14% of parents last year took out these student plus loans. And so you have that on top of the debt that the students already owe. And so it's just incredible. And that's the debt that the parents have to pay. And so, and as a result of that, because of the amount of debt, because of the minimum salaries that some of them are making and having to take care of themselves and live, 1 out of 8 student loans are either delinquent or in default.
And what's interesting about the Parent Plus loan is they want to hold the parents accountable for paying the loans and taking these loans out, but they don't want to give you any information about your student who you paying these loans for. And so to me, that's really interesting. They say, well, we can't tell you nothing about your child in college, but except for we could tell you about this bill and make sure you get that paid.
Yes. Because you signed your name on a dotted line. So they're like, yeah, whoever is responsible is going to have to pay that student loan. And so I did a little bit more research, and this just puts it all in perspective. The average cost of college for last year to attend a private college was $34,740. The average cost of college last year to go out of state in a public university was $25,620. However, if you're in an in-state school and you are a state resident, your in-state tuition on average was $9,970 for the year.
And she's not talking about room and board and stuff. So
just tuition.
Let's just be clear about that.
It is. There is a big difference.
They charge you more to stay there and eat than they charge you to actually attend classes.
Right. And that's why there are so many schools who have these food pantries and everything, because students cannot afford to pay tuition, live on campus, and buy a meal plan.
Right.
And that's just amazing. And so that's why you hear about the amount of debt that students are in. I know some people right now who have taken out student loans, and they are using the student loans to live.
Yes.
Wow. And what we know for sure is that student loan debt, IRS tax debt, and child support debt are the only 3 that you cannot write off in a judgment.
Right, in a bankruptcy.
You can't do it. And so Sally Mae was smart, to go and lobby with the United States Congress and say, look, we need our money. We loan this money, and we don't want people writing this debt off. And so those 3 things you cannot write off. So the money has to be paid no matter what.
Yes, even when you die.
Yes,
they
exactly.
come back to your estate. So when we came out of college, of course, coming from Chicago to Virginia, we were paying out-of-state tuition for a while.
Yes, we were.
And when I finished college, I owed about $14,000 in student loan debt. My husband was in-state, and his parents primarily paid for him to go to college. And so when he came out of college, he owed $2,500 in student loan debt.
Isn't that something?
And we thought the world had come to an end.
Yeah. And as the oldest, I owed $16,000 because I stayed in school an extra year. So I owed $16,000 in student loan debt. And I think it's all relative. Right. Because that was a lot of money.
It was.
That was a lot of money. And never thought that we would pay that money off.
Right. I was like, oh, my Jesus, I'm never getting from under this. Yes. But in hindsight, right.
And we know that when we try to create legacies for our students and our children, we have got to talk to them about debt. Because I don't remember anyone really talking to me about debt. Right. And so we just got into that cycle of getting into debt. But these students, the amount of debt that they're coming out with on top of the cost of living and, to have a vehicle and just how much it just costs to live. Right. It's just very expensive. And what made me really interested in this particular topic is because I just know some people that know some people that know some people that's been in trouble with student loan debt. But I also heard recently, for example, that in California, in the LA and San Francisco region, that you have a lot of homeless people. And they're not homeless people based on what we typically think homeless people are. These are people that are making, on average, $100,000 a year. But because of student loan debt, the cost of housing in that region, they cannot afford to live.
Wow.
Is that amazing?
That is amazing.
And quality housing. So you have these tent cities everywhere around in that particular region. And you have some tent cities here people just are not aware of. You have tent cities in this region too. But it's not because people aren't working. They're just the working poor because they have to pay student loan debt, whatever, medical bills, all kinds of things that's requiring them to have to live like that.
And when you start listening to these politicians talking about doing student loan forgiveness and all of that, if your loan is in default,
yes,
you can't work for the government.
Oh, wow.
Because it's a
federal loan. Okay.
And you can't work for the federal government. And in this particular area, that's our business, right? That's our industry. And so if you live in an area where government is primarily your industry, you can't even get a job if you are in default on your student loans. And so it's important for us to try to figure out how to make it work, right? Maybe we need to start thinking about being more creative in how we live and start, sharing expenses until we can get from under some of this debt, because otherwise you will be living out on the street just because you chose to go to school to try to get a better job. And now your choice to go to school is now a thorn for you.
Right.
And a hindrance.
And I would also say, I would look at the graduation rates at schools,
yes.
because we know that a lot of students go to school, but there are not a whole lot graduating from these colleges within 4 years. And so I would advocate, because now I work at a community college, and so I see the benefits of students going to community colleges for their first 2 years and then transferring to a state-supported school that supports that community college, like here in the state of Maryland. And I think it's happening all over, to be very honest with you. And there's nothing wrong with going to a community college. They're getting their basic courses out of the way. It's cheaper. Most of them leave with minimal or no debt. And then when they go...
And an associate's degree.
And it's an associate's degree, right. And then when they go to the 4-year college, they only have to do that 2 years. And by that time, the parents and the student has probably figured out how to pay for the remainder of that college tuition. So I think that's another option.
It certainly is.
Yes, another option.
Not for my son. He got to go next year. Right.
Well, your son may be a little different because of sports, and he may get some type of academic and sports scholarship.
Yes.
And that's not the case for a lot of students.
It's not the case for a lot of students, but whether he get that or not, he has to go.
Okay.
Next year.
Well,
he got to go, y'all. We didn't already had this conversation. I was trying to get him out this year, but he wouldn't play right. So.
And one of the things that Ira and I talk about all the time is, we can live much longer than we think.
Yes.
And we have to be prepared for retirement, and we have to teach our children about being prepared for later in life.
Yes.
And if we're having all of this debt over our head, then that can prolong your ability to retire and how you retire. Because one of the things we know for sure is that as seniors, we have to take care of ourselves, because this country is not kind to seniors.
No,
and so
not at all.
your income decreases. Your quality of life can decrease if you're not prepared. And so, and
your health decreases.
Yes, exactly. And so we know that if our students, your children and their children are not working for organizations that have retirement plans, that's another problem. That compounds.
Absolutely is.
And so they have to learn to save for retirement on their own. And how many of them are really doing that and understanding the benefit of that? And so paying off houses. We know our students don't want to live out in the suburbs, but some of them are not going to have a choice, because they're just not going to be able to afford to live in these high rent districts. I was reading the other day that in New York City, that the rent just went up on in Manhattan, 1-bedroom apartment is $2,900. And that's probably 700 square feet, if that.
Right.
And so that's just giving you some indication of how much it costs to live. And so that's why this particular topic is so very important. And what we do know is that there are lots of resources out here, and people just need to know where they are. They need to research them, and they need to put in the work to make sure that their students are getting everything, their children are getting everything that they possibly can to help minimize or eliminate any need for student loan debt.
And I think too, as parents, we have to do more in terms of guiding our kids to the jobs of the future, right?
Yes.
Because right now, it's all fine and well. Some of this stuff is just going to be standard, right? Hotel, restaurant management, that's cute, right? But do you want to work 7 days a week and then on your feet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? That's not necessarily what you want to do, and that's not necessarily where your top paying job is going to be. And so we got to do better as parents of educating ourselves so that we know how to steer our kids to occupations that will be around and that will be high paying occupations.
And it's funny that you said that, because the other day in my strategic management course that I teach to master's level students at Strayer University, one of the things we talked about was that. And I had them to look up the jobs of the future from an HR perspective, and it's healthcare.
Yes.
IT.
Yes, absolutely.
Sciences.
Yes.
Right. Education is in there because we're going to always need education. But these are the jobs of the future.
But most education jobs not high paying. So understand that.
Most jobs coming out for your first experience are not high paying unless you are in a technical field. And so you have to work your way. And, I don't know what high paying is for some people, because some people think $50,000 is high paying. It's about perspective, right?
And it's about where you live.
Exactly.
Right? $50,000 could be high paying depending on where you live.
Exactly.
But you still got to keep it in perspective, right? Because in this area where we live, in the DMV area, DC, Virginia, and Maryland, $50,000 ain't going to cut it. Right, it's a
not
lot
if
of
you
people
have student loan debt and all that other stuff.
With all the other stuff that come along with living.
Yes.
And so, Sharon was talking about the cost of living, the cost of an apartment in New York. I was considering next year to sell my house and downsize and move to an apartment close to my job. I went and looked at an apartment that was about 700 square feet, and the rent was $4,000.
Oh my goodness!
The rent. And you don't get a parking space.
That wasn't a condo?
It wasn't a condo. It was an apartment. And you don't get a parking space. You have to pay for parking.
Right.
And so, and then if you have two people in the apartment, that means you got two cars. And so now you got to pay for two cars. And so when it was all said and done, it was the same amount of money for me to live in my house than live in this small apartment that I didn't have nowhere to put my clothes. So, it's all relative, right? So you just got to know where you live, understand what the economics are, and then make some informed decisions.
Girl, that's why you need to come on the Maryland side, but I'll leave that alone.
Girl, I got 3 more years and I'm skipping this place altogether. I'm going where it's real cheap to live.
Yes.
Like $120,000 will get you a mansion. I'm trying to live somewhere like that.
Yes, and a lot of people are doing that. You see a lot of people, coming down from the north, going south into places where people wouldn't ordinarily want to live, North Carolina, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, because the land is cheaper, right? But in terms of making sure that we are staying focused, the student loan debt we're in a crisis.
We absolutely are.
We're just in a crisis, and I just think that whoever we can bring on the show who has that expertise to help us to understand it better and to point us in the direction of where we can find this information, the better off our listening audience will be. And so what we're going to do is take a short break. Our guest is here. We're going to bring her on, and then we will resume the conversation.
Yes.
Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle, and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3:00 p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep.
What company do you keep? Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
welcome back, everyone, to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. You can see we're just having a good time, and we know that our guest has a beautiful name that we were trying to make sure that we did not destroy.
Right. And I probably would, so I'm not going to.
And so Sherelle said, well, we're going to let you say it first. Sherelle and I met this dynamic woman a few months ago at an event we were at, and there was an instant connection, and we wanted to make sure that we had her on the show. And so we're going to let you introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, everyone. I am Ade BC, Ade Boale.
Yeah.
Okay, so y'all say all that.
Not all the vowels in my name.
That's right.
Okay, one more time. Say it again.
Ade BC, Ade Boale.
Okay,
Out
I
of
like
BC, out of the bowl.
You see how it rolls off her tongue? It won't roll off my life. But I have to concentrate real hard.
Is there a meaning? What's the meaning for your name?
Ade BC means the crown has multiplied.
Oh.
Yellow. And Ade Boale, my last name, means the crown has returned home.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay, I like it.
I just
that's
love.
beautiful.
So, and where are you from originally?
Nigeria.
I
But
love
I
these.
was born up the street, George Washington University Hospital.
Oh, wow. Okay, yes.
And it's my alma mater, so we'll get into that.
Yeah.
All right.
Howard University?
George Washington.
George Washington. Okay,
GW.
all right.
GW.
GW. Okay, so we met my soror, Deborah BC, at a BC. At a BC. We met her at an event, like we said before, and there was an instant connection. And this is such an important topic. So tell us about your business. How did you, get into, trying to help people understand student loan debt and avoid it, and finding out, what's available to them in terms of scholarships?
Yes, it started when I was going to college myself, when I started to apply to college, but then also applying to scholarships for my own education. And I earned the Gates Millennium Scholarship when I was going to school. So Bill Gates paid for my college education.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Along with some school scholarships and local awards that I also received when I was applying to school, and graduated school debt-free, the most expensive university in the nation when I was in school, at $56,000 a year.
Oh.
So wait a minute, hold on.
Undergrad.
For undergrad, yeah. So the Bill Gates Scholarship, tell our audience what that scholarship is.
Pretty much, Bill Gates created a fund, a 20-year grant to pay upwards of $1 billion. It was $1 billion grant for
Right.
20,000 students, 1,000 students each year over the 20 years. And it started in 1999, and technically it stopped in 2016 because the first year they took 4,000 students. Mm-hmm. So they said, okay, let's amend some things here. Let's do 1,000 students a year, and then we'll build it out over the next few years. So he was supported by his other billionaire friends.
Yes.
Including Warren Buffett and
Yes.
some others who are some secret donors who have given to this pot of money to pay the education of students, because they saw the rising costs over those years and how students could not afford to go to school just to get an education, specifically students of color, students from underserved areas in the nation. So they created that grant and were able to pay tuition for most students up to PhD level.
Oh.
Wow.
So 10 years for each scholar.
So 10 years for each scholar. That is amazing.
Beautiful.
So you were able to get the Bill Gates, but what interested you or prompted you to go after other scholarships? So you didn't get enough from the Bill Gates to pay.
I applied at the same time.
Oh, okay. Talk to us about
I
that.
applied at the same time. So let me go back to your original question. I got into my business because people in my church realized that, wait, you graduated college debt free? Help my children.
Right.
Do the same thing that you
Yes.
did, because whatever you
Yes.
did clearly worked for you. You went to school. You don't have any debt, any loans. Teach them. So it was like, okay, you started church, and then it's kind of like, but really people are asking me for this. God, are you trying to tell me something? And I had a business coach. She was like, whatever you get asked about and you're using your skill or talent that you don't have to think, that is your gift.
That's a good definition of that.
That is your
That's a
gift.
good definition.
When you have something that people are consistently
Asking you for.
and picking, and they say, oh, can I pick your brain real quickly?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question real quickly? Can I talk to you real quickly? And they consistently do that, and you see a pattern. That is a gift that you have been given that you should nurture. So in doing so, I was able to build my company, Upliftology, where we're uplifting greatness in the next generation and
That's
helping
it.
students understand their options when they're going to college so they can graduate school debt free. And then from there, what are you looking to do so that you can go forward into your career based on what you study and that you're aligned with your own purpose and your goals? Because what we're doing, the way that we apply to college now, I always say, I'm like, we're confusing people.
Right.
You tell them that, okay, you're going to college, you don't need to worry about what you want to major in. But it's okay for you to go to this $50,000 school and not know. Does that make sense?
No.
The fact that we continue to tell students that you don't need to know what you want to study when you go to college, you can go in undecided at this expensive school to pay for some GCRs that you can get from the community college.
Exactly.
The same education, if not, and I
Right.
took some community college courses.
Yes.
I didn't do the 2 years, but I did some summer courses at a community college. I'm like, thank you, Jesus,
That's right.
that I got that out of the way.
Yes.
Because I'm also concerned about my GPA. I'm also concerned about being able to have access to the professor. Everything plays a part. So that's how I started my business and been going strong in that. Went full time last year. This time last year, actually, in full time entrepreneurship. So I'm fully focused on that to help more students graduate school debt free.
And so how do you reach out to students? So you started with your church, so that's the connection.
Yes.
Okay. And
So I started with my church, and then I started doing webinars so I can reach people across the nation. Started doing more speaking engagements and talking to people wherever I meet them. I introduce myself as an entrepreneur. What do you do? I'm a college coach. What does that mean? And explaining myself. So sometimes it's been mere connections from having a conversation and being open about what I do.
Right.
And having that dialogue with whomever I meet.
And so what are some of the takeaways been in your conversation with some of the clients that you've had around this whole concept of student loans and accessing college?
2 things. Students are lazy. Children are lazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, for the most
That's
part.
one. And 2, a lot of parents do not understand the modern day college application process or are not involved, which is equal weight.
Right.
Not good for the children because when the parents are confused, you're teaching your children what you know or what you do not know.
Right.
You can
Are these well, I guess it's a mixture of parents, so it can be some first generation students. And then it can be some parents who went to college, but they don't understand this modern day. Okay.
Yep. So
Yes.
it's exactly what you said. It's a mixture. I'm first generation, along with my sister, so we had to figure it out on our own. Our parents did come to college here, but international students versus domestic students,
Yes.
you don't have the same benefits. You know, so we had the opportunity to apply for scholarships. They did not. They were paying out of pocket. So that right there is a completely different dialogue and understanding that they did not have.
Right.
My sisters are 4 and 5 years older than me, and they went to Catholic University and American University, but they have thousands of dollars in loans.
Right.
You know? So it was even my elder sister's motivation to do some research, get some scholarships. And I remembered, hey, I learned about the Gates Millennium Scholarship the year prior, applied to it, nothing but the finger of God. Because I'm just like, I'm not the smartest student in my school, but I was a hardworking student.
Yes.
I was class president. I had things to back me up. So I was able to write my college applications and do the work. And I mean, literally nothing but the finger of God. So
And I think what you're saying too is so very important, that the student has to take some ownership, right, and have some passion around what it is they want to do. Because so many parents, this is not to bash parents. Parents want the best for their kids, so they're pushing their kids in the direction they think their children should go. But the children are not taking the ownership of that.
Nope.
And so because you were able to do that, and you knew what you needed to do when you wrote that application.
Yep. And you guys, I'm sorry.
No, but a lot of the students don't have to, because they don't have to take ownership in other stuff, right?
Right.
Oh,
So
that's true.
It all works together.
Right.
With this generation of kids we have coming up, that's 21 and under. Even 22 and under, they're used to really 25 and under. They're used to parents handing them everything.
Yes.
And so when they get around college age time or start thinking about college, they looking at the parents like, okay, so you did everything else for me. Why you not doing this?
Right.
And then it's almost like it's a wait and see. Like we don't have to take the action. And so talk to us about your experience with that.
To piggyback off of what both of you said, a lot of these students, this generation, I hate to classify it, but it's honestly a repeated behavior, which makes me believe that it's true, are entitled because of the accessibility that they have to the world.
Yes.
Through computers, through cell phones, where they're able to do whatever they want, right? And now they're able to level up to adulthood and think that they have something when they have absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
You know, and they think that they're living on their own, that they're doing whatever because they have this access to the world of what mom and dad are paying for,
Right.
9 times out of 10. And I mean, they have the fancy phone. They're literally are adults. They have iPhones. They have Galaxies and Notes. And I'm just like, get a flip phone and be okay. All you need to do is call mom and dad. They need to make sure that you're okay. But because they have entitlement privileges, and we're in a generation where do not offend me, right? Where in schools, I went to my high school about a month or two ago, and I was talking to some of my friends who now teach at the school who work as administrators. If a student gets into a fight, and is a female student, if a male administrator breaks up the fight, they cannot touch the girl.
That's right.
Right? So if the man grabs her right here, oh my God, he touched my right breast.
Yes.
And he can get the man fired.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong. There are some molesters out there.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Jeffrey Epstein. That's a whole nother story. Go ahead. R. Kelly. A whole nother story. Go ahead. Donald Trump. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Who needs
Yes.
to be contained? We completely get that. And I respect the fact that we need to have boundaries, but we also need to teach our children responsibility, being upright, being honest, and not using or taking advantage of their protection. Because now we complain when we don't feel secure, but when there's too much security, we complain that we have too many chains and shackles on us. We're just confused.
Let me tell you something. You just said something that's profound and that's near and dear to my heart. I really believe a couple things. I believe that when parents have children, I think all parents should be mandated to go to each grade level, you know, in terms of elementary, middle, high school, and spend 2 weeks in the school. I just think it should be required, to be very honest with you. And then the second piece, because I think it gives you perspective. Yeah. And then the second piece is I think parents need to take classes and lessons on brain development, because what happens is, you know, you give your child everything, and then when they get to be 18, for some reason, it's magic. That's a magic number that they're going to change, and that's not what happens.
Right.
Because the brain, the frontal lobe, where the decision making happens, right? It doesn't fully develop until you're 24, 25 years old, and that's why parents are saying, you know, they'll see the light bulb come on. That's what they say. Like, we've been saying this to you all your life. Now you're getting it. Well, yeah, because now they can make the connections because their frontal lobe has fully developed. And so I don't know how you feel about that. So sometimes when you're having these conversations, you know, that's how I'm thinking it through. I'm thinking, oh, they don't even really understand, you know? And then they're upset because the adult child really hasn't changed much.
Yep. And no, you hit the nail on the head. So even going back to your first point, I don't know who I was speaking to earlier in the week. It's so important for parents to understand how their children learn. And that only happens when you're actively engaged in their education. Going into the classroom, watching them how they do their homework, seeing how they reason, how they think, and how they perform, because everybody's brains are created differently. It's made up of the same stuff, but it's shaped differently. We think differently. That's how we have people who are artists, people who are mathematicians, scientists, everything, because we think differently, right? So we need to understand how our children learn and receive information, because even among the three of us, talk less of you guys. How many siblings? It's like, it's a lot of y'all.
It's 8 of us.
Each and every one of y'all are different. The two of you guys are different. Talk less of the other siblings. You know what I mean? So you have to know how each child learns, how they cope with other people, other settings.
Yes.
And that even helps you when they're going to college.
Right.
Because college, they're not created equal. And I think that people, when they're applying to college, they think that, oh, I'm applying to college, and it means everything's the same across the board. It's not.
Right. And one of the things I'm very clear about is that as African Americans, one of the things genetically that we're very good at is sciences. Right?
Right.
And math. Engineering. But our students,
I feel like we're struggling with engineering.
Well, no. I'm talking about just from a historical standpoint in terms of how we're built, how we're made. But what I'm saying is, for some reason, our students tend to shy away from that when that is a natural gift and talent for them, and I think it's their experiences
in the classroom,
and not just in the classroom, and what we tell them, and what you said. You know, kids are gonna, most kids are gonna take the easy way out, and they don't want to, put a little bit of effort. And so I think when we start talking about what should they major in, we really have to start telling them about our history. You know, we built pyramids. I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
You know, it's in us to do that.
You know, having a son in high school who is in the gifted and talented program, they don't do anything to channel his talent in that area, right? In math.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
And the teachers are almost in handcuffs in terms of how they teach and what they teach. And so my son said his math teacher sucks the whole life out of him. So what do you think he learned in that class? Nothing, right? Because the teacher is not delivering it and doing things creatively so that the kids can not only be interested in it, but they can also remember it.
Yeah.
But when he had a class where they had to do a rap about something, right? I bet you he remembered that.
But what we don't hear is other
Coaches.
schools saying that. So what I'm saying to you is by design. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely by design.
Because
It's absolutely by design.
yeah, you know, we're talking about scholarships and getting your kids in school, but it's all connected.
It's all connected.
It's all connected, right.
It's all connected. No, because
Yes.
even with the scholarship thing, people.
Yes.
I had a lady from my church who moved to South Africa, but obviously her children are citizens, so they were born here. Now they're in South Africa. Long story short, came back March. Said, "Hey, sis, can you help me with scholarships? My son is coming to school in the fall," and I missed the part that said in the fall. And I was like, "Oh yeah, you can enroll in my course in the fall." She's like, "Well, don't you think it's too late?" Well, when is he going to school?
In the fall.
In the fall.
Yes. Yeah, see that, and
Are you
that's what
serious?
happens. Mm-hmm.
I was just like, "But you know, this is my business. Like, why
Right.
would you think that he can come?" I said, "I don't work with people. Start working with people in the spring semester. I start in the fall,
Right.
Because it's all connected,
Right. It
You know,
is.
and we have built ourselves to the point where we're waiting to the 11th hour, expecting first hour results.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't work that way.
So talk to us about, so a client comes to you, you have your client, so you working with the student and the parents, or the students alone, and what does that look like, your coaching sessions?
Yes. So that's a great question. I work with both. I started working with the students, then I realized, you know what, I'm not there with you. I need some oomph.
Right.
Let's get the parents in here. And the reality of it is parents are so disconnected because they're either working too much. They don't understand. They're telling their children to go out and figure it out. Children are lazy, so children are bringing back the information back to home to mom and dad. So it's just like teens want to be left alone. They want to figure out their own life. They don't want the helicopter parent,
Right.
but they also need the support because they're still children.
That's right.
So a coaching session with me looks like, on the onset, we're having a strategy call, mom or dad. Please be present, because essentially you're paying for the services.
Right, exactly.
Be
Exactly.
present. You want to know who's talking to your children. You want to know who's engaged with their life. You want to know what they're putting into their system, because essentially we feed off of what we hear, what we learn, and what we're told that who we are.
Right.
And that's how we operate. So we have this onset of a coaching call. But then you go through my course. So now I have a course where it's a self-paced course. And what I tell students is, when you enroll in my program, you can go through this course within 6 to 8 weeks and apply to all the schools that you want to apply to. What I've noticed is that a lot of students, specifically students of color, even more specifically Black students, wait until November, December to start applying to colleges when applications open up as early as August.
That's right.
And it's kind of like when you have the ability or the accessibility to apply to school up until February, we want to wait until January to get it out. And I tell my clients, before the end of your fall semester, you will apply to all the colleges and scholarships that you need to, because one, the early bird gets the worm.
Right.
Two, applying early does not mean that you have to apply early decision. It means that you're taking early action with no pun intended, because early action is also a decision point for some schools. Early action, early decision. But when you apply early, you're relieving yourself from the stress of having to do the runaround at the last minute, having to get recommendations from teachers who are also busy with their academic curriculum.
Yes.
Who can't forget about you, which I've seen happen before. Students thought that the teacher was only thinking about her, came back and was like, "Hey, can I get the recommendation?" Yeah, it's a day till the time that it's due, and I have not written it. I forgot. You know, because students
So they see time. So when you say you have until the end of the semester to apply, they see that as them having time.
Yes.
Instead of understanding what that timeline means in terms of the early admissions process.
Yep. So
Wow.
what I do is I walk through a step-by-step during this week, this is what you're doing. During this week, this is what you're doing. And of course, some people will take longer than others because everybody learns differently.
Right.
Everyone performs differently, but you pace yourself according to how you work. And we're doing bi-weekly check-ins with the group because the way you learn is going to be different. The way I learn is going to be different than the way you learn. So it's easy for us to all come back together and do a huddle and say, hey, this is what I found. This is what I've done. I'm a student in Maryland, but I have a friend who's in Texas. Hey, I heard about a scholarship that's based for students in Maryland that I think you can apply for. So it's creating a community with the students and the parents. So we're all coming together to bring our resources together so that we all can sharpen each other.
And so what kind of conversations do you have with them about student loan debt? I know parents probably have, because they understand debt and loans, but what do you say to students to help them to understand what this loan and this debt stuff is all about?
Keep it as minimum as possible. That's the first thing. But understanding your options. When you're applying to college, first and foremost, it's expensive. And a lot of students, when I started my business, I didn't realize a lot of students didn't know that you had to pay to apply to school. And I'm just like,
yes.
what did they talk to you about in school?
Not that. Not that.
They were like, oh, you have to pay to apply? Huh?
Yes.
And then I had it when I was at my school. One boy was like, what's the FAFSA? And my friend was right there. And I was like, please keep your poker face.
They can't help it.
Please keep your poker face. Because
Yes.
I wanted to just like snap my neck and be like, why does he know? So when he left, I was like, what?
Why doesn't he know that?
What was that? But no, now I'm only forgetting your question because I just got riled. I'm just like.
So what do you say to students about student loan debt so they can
Yes.
understand the magnitude of what you're talking about?
So I recently ran into a lady who was educated. You guys actually spoke about everything I would speak about in your introduction, and she was like, I don't want to steal her thunder. I'm like, y'all just took it off. Y'all keep going. Y'all take it off. I met a lady who had, I think it was $70,000 base loan debt when she was coming out of college, undergrad and master's. She did a 5-year program, if I'm not mistaken. Let's give her 6 years. Over 6 years, she had $70,000 in loan.
Wow.
And this was graduating in 1988, I think it was.
Oh,
90.
wow.
Which is a lot.
That is a lot for that
Yes.
time.
Which is a lot.
Yes.
So she said, before I even tell you anything else, look at this amount. The amount was $536,000. I can't remember the last $3.
Oh, my goodness.
3 numbers, excuse me. So she said, over the 30 years, because of interest, this is how much my loan has accrued to. Because she went back and got a PhD as well.
Wow.
So I was just looking at that. My body hurt. I was just like, I'm sorry.
500 and
I cannot make that. She gave me that screenshot. I was like, can you send me that screenshot, please? It will teach people.
And we know that, certain fields like medical doctors, they probably come out
She's
with
a PhD.
Oh, wow.
She's a PhD. Well, still, it's expensive. Don't get me wrong.
I know I have an EDD, and I know how much it costs. That's why I was on track 3.5 years. That's all I got.
Yes.
Exactly.
So when I saw that number and she told me that, now it's been forgiven because she's an educator. So I'm just like,
Okay.
what? I was like, let me praise
But
God for you.
and she had to work
She had to
so many
work.
years.
And people,
in order to
my
get it
loans to
forgiven.
get forgiven. No, but you have to put the work into it to get it
Right.
forgiven.
Exactly.
You have to make sure that you're a
Title
stand-up
I
citizen.
school and all of that.
Everything. There's steps. You even have to work to get it forgiven.
Right.
And I think we're building a generation where people think that you can have this lifestyle of working from home and having a beautiful lifestyle, traveling the world without working by being a blogger. I'm like, but bloggers work.
Yeah, they
Right,
do.
right.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They still have things to do in order for them to make that income. Debt is real. And interest, people don't understand the power of interest. It's one thing to borrow, but when you borrow, you're borrowing with interest in mind that if you don't pay me back by this time, you're going to pay me back more.
Right.
And people don't understand that concept.
Right. And you have to teach children that, particularly children who've never really worked anywhere
They
and
don't
don't pay
understand
bills.
that
They don't
concept.
understand that concept. And so that's why it's so important for parents to have these conversations early on.
It's not a one-time conversation.
No, and talk about, the family finances and just all of that. So the students.
all a part of my class. And
Yeah,
that's
okay, good.
exactly why I need parents on it. Because when we get to the financial part, we're talking about budgeting.
Right.
Mom and Dad, how much have you saved up for my education? Mom and Dad, do I have to plan to go get all the scholarships? I tell my students now, expecting to pay for your college with only scholarships is a bad financial plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Why? Because of the advent of the internet and the accessibility for people to apply to school and apply for scholarships, it's also increased the number of competition.
That's right. Exactly.
So when you're competing with students, not only in your school, not only your state, also nationwide and now international, because there's a lot of students who are born here, who are raised in other countries.
That's right.
Who can apply for those same scholarships. And until people understand that you're not only applying for one specific scholarship, you're competing with everyone else who's eligible and who finds out about it and who applies, we won't get people to think about it. And even the concept of community college has been belittled so much, and it's just kind of like, you guys, the reason why these private schools have been able to raise their prices year after year, besides the rise of cost of living, is because people have put so much demand on it.
Yes.
Right? Community college is so inexpensive because people have not put the demand on it. And if we have students who are engaging with community colleges more, going to the schools to either take their GCRs after graduating in high school or doing dual enrollment while they're still in high school,
that's right.
we will never get to the point where these colleges feel the burn of not having students enroll year after year in the thousands.
And so I heard you say a couple things about, minimizing and eliminating debt. Look for those scholarships. If your child is in high school, they
Have
can
a financial plan first.
have a financial plan
First.
Exactly. First. The scholarships, of course, savings. You didn't say anything, but I'm sure this is part of it. Your state's 529 plan,
Yes, it is.
dual enrollment in high school and community college, because you're getting those college credits. So when you go to college, you only need those 2 years to get through school and pay that tuition. And and then the general scholarships, which I love to talk about, that people just don't talk about a lot. These scholarships you can just go out there and get, like on Scully, and they follow you. They're not school specific. And so all of those are just some ways that the child, and they're out there, and there's so many that go unclaimed every year.
Well, here's what's interesting to me.
And they do it. People do it.
When my daughter graduated in 2015, she wanted to major in biology. And of course, up until that point, I kept hearing over and over and over again about how, we need more minorities in these sciences and the STEM programs and all of this stuff and all this money that was out there for them. But here's what my experience was, and I'm sure a lot of people had the same experience. We applied to hundreds of scholarships and never heard back from any. Not you didn't get it or anything. It just like fell in a black hole. And so I'm wondering, now it's time for my son. I'm like, okay, I don't want to spend my energies applying for scholarships where it has a deadline on when you have to apply, but no deadline on when you're going to tell me or if you're going to ever tell me. And my son wants to do one of the STEM programs. And so I'm thinking, as a young black man wanting to be in STEM, that there will be some opportunities available for him. But I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to look, because I certainly don't want the same experience I had with my daughter.
And you need a coach. That's what it sounds like.
Go ahead, girl. You can say it. That's what I would say if it was my business.
So my course is called Cash for College. You can get it on my website, upliftology.co. But what I need parents to understand, that's a very, very transparent and very honest experience, because a lot of people have that experience. A lot of people have that experience, and I can't explain why that happens.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
I can't speak for those organizations, unfortunately, because the reality of it is people can advertise whatever the hell they want to on the internet.
Right. That's true. That's
right?
true.
People can, because of this accessibility, it's also created so much fraud. And I will tell you, all those scholarships that we see they're obviously not true.
So what do you go for legitimate, the legitimate scholarships? Where do we recommend people to look?
Of course, you go for the big ones still. You always go for the big ones, but they're not your only ones.
Right.
They're not your only ones. You go for the one. And this is why I tell students to apply to schools early, because schools have buckets of money.
Yes, they do.
And they allocate that money early, because there's FAFSA deadline, there's the state deadline, and then there's a school deadline for your financial application. There's 3 deadlines you're playing with. And I always tell students, apply according to the school deadline, because the school also has the ability to give you money. It may not be full, but at the very least some.
Partial.
And make friends with a financial aid advisor. Pick one. Whoever's assigned.
Call and say hi.
I'm not
they
even
know your
kidding.
voice. Yes.
My financial aid advisor wrote it out with me the 6 years I was at George Washington for my undergrad and my master's, because even though I had a scholarship, listen, I need to make sure, because the caveat of the Gates Millennium Scholarship, for instance, is they pay whatever is unmet need, right?
Oh, okay.
GW gave me money. I had the Pell Grants. I had some other small scholarship, something else from GW, which I can't remember at this moment. So Gates paid the unneed met. If I had no money from GW, they would pay up the $56,000. But because I wanted to make sure all my bases were covered, I went and I spoke to her every single semester, and I would go and check in with her. But because I built that relationship with her, she
smart.
always had my back. Sometimes before I even knew the money was in the office. Hey, Adebisi, come and see me. I want to make sure everything looks good. Okay.
So that's a strategy that you share with students.
Yes.
But you took initiative to do that.
And a lot of students now don't.
Right.
They do not.
They don't.
I don't know what.
But you knew that your parents weren't going to be able to pay.
No.
Exactly. And so I think it's about
But
parents
see,
being realistic too.
The kids don't care today if the parent. They don't have no idea. They don't care if the
You know what
parents
they
can pay
say?
or
They
not.
said mom and dad are going to take care of it.
Absolutely.
But it's also because mom and dad are not having that conversation early
with
enough.
them. They're not saying
They're not
that
having it early enough.
I've been
For the
saying- I've
fact
been
my
saying
friend
that for-
emailed me in March asking for scholarships for her son going to school in August. Bruh, what? You've known about my business for the past 3 years. I read that email and I was like, listen, sis, I'm sorry, I can't help. Because what's going to happen now is you're going to kill me to help your son.
Right.
I love you with the love of Christ, but I'm not, you already have a savior. I can't do it for you.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's
Yes.
like until you have those conversations early, there's nothing, you're competing with the world. You have to think about it that way. People
You
all
are competing with the world.
You, have to
You
think
are.
about it.
And that's
You
why
have
that
to- you can-
early.
and then even international students, and I tell this people, most international students, international scholarships are minuscule. They do exist, but we're not talking about that. International students are required to pay up front, right? They're required to pay up front. They're required to pay in full. There's minimum scholarships. So when you see an international student, they're here on their own bill 9 times out of 10.
Okay.
In that case, when a school has the ability...
Hold on, let's go back to that
like,
because
wait,
that's
hold on.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Because most people think international students come here to go to school for free.
No.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
And she's not speaking of all, but she's just
Right.
saying.
Not,
Right.
but majority. Majority pay out of pocket. There's no scholarship for international students. Who's going to pay? Not the federal government. They're not citizens. How? You know what I mean? So there are some private scholarships that do. Some schools even give scholarships to some students who are deserving of it. But when you have international students who are paying out of pocket versus a student who needs money, guess who the school is going to take?
Paying
I
out
hate-
of pocket.
I
Paying
hate
out of
when
pocket.
people say that, schools are nonprofit. Who told you that? This is a business. When the cost of living goes up, guess what? The cost of education is going to go up because you're paying for the rent, you're paying for the lights to be on, you're paying for them to run the school. So all those things go into account.
And so our engineer is giving us the finger, like wrap it up. This conversation is so powerful. And so we just want to thank you. Tell them how they can reach you before we close out, Sora.
Yes, you can reach me at upliftology.co. It's spelled exactly how it sounds. Uplift, OLOGY.co. And my email is there. I live on email.
Okay.
I live on email, so my phone is always with me. So
Yes, and thank you for coming
All right,
in.
thank
And I
you
hope
for
our
coming.
audience has gotten something out of this conversation today. And we look forward to seeing you on next Sunday.
Yes.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.
bye.
Welcome to